Imagine a crop that you could grow with pretty minimal effort and that could feed yourself and your family for a very, very long time. Cassava is one such crop that we can grow right here in Trinidad, and it's something that we have the privilege of being able to grow in such a nice warm climate that people more north or more south that have colder temperatures will not be able to grow. So it's definitely worth it to grow or learn how to grow the cassava. We're going to be talking about it today. Hello everyone, thank you all so very much for joining in. This is Alan from the Trinity Gardeners channel, and I'm so happy that you're here because today we're going to really be taking food security into our own hands and learn how to grow one of the most amazing crops that we have right here in Trinidad. Now, we're going to start by talking about the potato. In the 1800s, the potato was the most important crop that you had all throughout North America. You had it in Europe, and when the potato started to have a blight on it, it started something that we call the potato famine because potatoes were cheap, easily grown, and high in calories. Imagine now that they did not have that crop anymore, and that's what caused a lot of problems in Europe. That's why Irish people had to migrate. Majority of your um, a third of the Irish had to leave and then go to the US, North America. Another third of the Irish actually died, and a third of the Irish remained, and those are the ones that really took the brunt of everything. And it was a really, really bad time because the potato was such an important crop. Now, fast forward to today, where we in Trinidad, we also import potatoes, but we do not need to necessarily depend on it. So we don't have to put ourselves in a situation like what had happened in the 1800s. Of course, with modern technology, it's a bit different, but we have something here, the cassava, that is cheaper than the potato. It's something that is easier to grow. It actually will grow properly in Trinidad. You can grow potatoes in Trinidad, but you will not get the yields that you're going to get in other places. Cassava, you can get the yields and a lot more than you could ever do with the Irish potato. And it's something that is even more dense in calories than the potato. More starch, more fiber, a little bit of cassava. If you live in Trinidad, you know it can sit in your stomach and make sure you're never, never hungry. So imagine we can grow that right here in Trinidad. Isn't it worth taking the time to learn how to grow cassava? Something that will grow so easy, something that you do not need to maintain in any big, massive way, and something that will give you such good, amazing food that could feed yourself and your family for a very, very long time. You use the exact same sticks. We're going to be using that today, and I'm going to be showing you how to plant cassava so that you could provide for yourself and your family and take that food security into your own hands. Let's get going. Okay, so here's a good, better exhibit. So you see here we have a bit that is very, very green. This is something I wouldn't use to plant. At the top here, I would faster risk this because this looks more like wood. And as you get lower on the plant, up, so I'll take a bit off here. As you get lower, it gets more like wood. So this is perfect for planting, and you always want to plant the right way up. So you look at the eye here, and make sure you all can see. Hi, Boogie, just give me a second. Right, so the cassava has eyes on it, right? The eyes are where we see a leaf would have come out and the leaf would have dropped. So if you look here, you see that the eyes are pointing down. The eyes are pointing down, right? So you don't want that to happen. So what you want to do, you want to make sure that the eyes are pointing up. So you see this? So now it's slanted and slanted facing up. And that is upright. Okay? If you want another confirmation of that. Okay, so here we have a plant and you can see that this is how the leaves are going. So the eyes are going to be pointed upwards, and that's how you know that you are planting your cassava upright so that the right part goes into the ground and the rest of it grows above the ground there. I really hope that this records because my mic has been giving me just a lot of trouble. I'll probably just have to do a voiceover if it doesn't. So here we have, and now we know what we're going to be using to plant in our cassava. So we're going to talk a bit more now about planting it in. It's very important that you make sure that you're getting the eyes, that you're making sure that the eyes are not pointing downwards. You're making sure that they're pointing upwards like that. All right. It can look very, very similar, to be honest. Sometimes you can have to kind of look at it a few times to kind of see. But eventually you're going to get it right, where you're going to see where it is pointing downwards and then where it is pointed upwards like that. So now that we have our stick that we're going to be planting in, we're going to talk just a bit about the soil preparation. For cassava, people do have a tendency to say that cassava likes hard ground, and that is not incorrect to say because roots in general do prefer when they're of a certain strength, a certain size, they like a bit of resistance because that resistance causes them to grow even better because they can have something to push against, which causes them to get stronger. Whereas if you have something that's too loose, you will find the roots are not being fully challenged and then they can be a bit wobbly. That's with general plants. With cassava, yes and no regarding the hard ground. You do want something that's firm enough so cassava can grow in areas where there is high clay content. It can also grow in areas where there is high sand content. It's not very, very picky. It can grow in both. But in general, a nice loamy soil that is going to give you the best chance at growing really good cassava. It's very important with your cassava that you're getting soil that is going to allow it some looseness at the very top when the cassava is younger, but then can go into a bit firmer ground as it's going down. So for instance, what I had in the back there, I had, as I said, it wasn't the very best. If you saw the harvest, you know that there was some gravel on it there. So the very top layer would have had some topsoil and some compost mixed. Underneath there would have been a layer of gravel, which was just a big mistake on my part. Nothing else would probably really grow there, but the cassava didn't mind it at all. And underneath there would be harder clay, and that's what will provide some of that resistance over there. A bit too much, to be honest. The cassava doesn't want to have too much resistance. If it's too hard, the cassava just will not grow very, very well. It will just meet the block and just stop growing there or just get really, really big and just kind of flatten out at the bottom. That happened with a few of the heads over there, but that's completely fine. Um, it's not completely fine. It's just that it's something to learn from. And just know that if you are growing cassava, one of the things that I would recommend is that you do till the soil to some extent, at least a good foot down. You should not have the cassava fighting for its life when it's just starting to get established. And then from there, the soil is a little bit firmer, then that's fine. The cassava will push down into it. Of course, if you have something like concrete on it there, the cassava just will not grow into that. So just be aware of it. And it's not necessarily wanting hard soil. It would like to get some soil that's a nice in between where it's not too sandy and loose, but it's not rock hard. It's something that's kind of in between. All right, that's going to lead me to my next point, which is that cassava spoils fairly easily. It can get root rot very, very easily. So cassava, you're going to find it planted in a lot of hills, hilly areas. If you have hills and you have a hard time deciding what to grow there, grow cassava, because cassava is going to really enjoy something that has good drainage and water is not settling. If water is settling, that is going to cause your cassava roots to spoil while it's still underneath there. So you want to get soil that is going to give you good drainage. That's why it grows well in soil with high percentages of sand. If there's a high sandy content in the soil, then it's going to grow even better, because the sand is going to help with having some of that drainage out to the soil itself. Not too much of sand. You're not planting cassava in the beach. That's what I'm talking about. Soil that has some percentage of sand, that it has some good mixture of loam, right, of clay and sand, so it's getting all of that together. It can retain water, but it's not getting too waterlogged or waterlogged at all, because the cassava just will not be very happy if you were to do that to it. Now, on the other end of that, cassava, it's sometimes thought that cassava needs to grow in very, very dry conditions. Cassava will grow in very, very dry conditions. That's why you can see it in places across Latin America, places that have like, sort of arid conditions sometimes. But the tubers do need to have moisture to get nice and big and thick. So you see some of those tubers that I have. So there, we had a good bit of rain within the past few um, weeks, and that really helped it to swell out. So a high moisture content is going to help your tubers to get nice and big. Now, there is a theory whereby you deprive certain plants, certain root crops of moisture, to then force that root crop to be pushing more downwards to get the water content. And then that is, in theory, supposed to let the roots get bigger and stronger. That can work for cassava. So within about 2 weeks just before harvesting, if you were to deprive water, it sometimes will have the cassava to just give it a nice little push and swell up even a bit more. But over the growing period of the cassava, you want to give it a fair enough supply of water. This cassava, I honestly have really never really watered. When it was really, really dry, very, very arid, I'm talking when it was like March of this year. If you all remember in Trinidad, it was like bone dry and scorching hot. At that point, I was watering the cassava 2 times a week, only 2 times, not every single day, 2 times a week. I was watering this cassava, and it was fine. Now we've been having some rain, so for the past month to 2 months, I've not watered this cassava at all. Right now, I'm filming this in July the 8th or the 9th. Um, Actually, no, I think it's the 11th today. Wow. Yeah. So today's 11th. So I'm filming it in July the 11th. So that means that it would have been July, June, and then the month that came before June, May, right? Um, April, May, June, yeah. So it's been fairly wet, so I haven't had to water the cassava. So cassava itself is really good at maintaining its own self, at just surviving, especially if it's getting rain. So you don't have to worry so much about the cassava. I really believe cassava is a plant it and forget it kind of crop, except when you have really, really arid conditions. You do need to give your cassava a good bit of moisture to make sure that it's surviving, but not too much so that it's not waterlogged, or that the roots are not going to get root rot because of too much of moisture. When it comes to sunlight, cassava is a warm weather crop. It's a summer crop. If you live somewhere temperate, like Canada, the US, UK, Europe, anywhere that gets the seasons, like in Trinidad, we just have rainy and wet, but we always have basically summer. In these other countries, you want to make sure that your growing season is at the very minimum 6 months. If it's under 6 months, it's really a uphill battle, because the cassava is only going to start really forming fair enough from 6 months onwards. This bit that I harvested for you all last week and that you will have seen has been growing for about 7 to 8 months, and that's still not full maturity. 1 year would really be full maturity. So if you're not able to give a growing season that's fairly warm for 6 months at least, then probably cassava is not for you. And that's unfortunate, but that's how the world, goes. We can't grow apples and grapes and pears and peaches in Trinidad and Tobago or the Caribbean. So, give and take. The northern temperatures and southern temperatures that are colder, they get the nice blueberries and strawberries and apples and not oranges, apples and pears and peaches and nectarines. We don't get that in Trinidad, but on the flip side, we get cassava, and for these other people, they don't really get cassava. So, it's give and take, and that's just the way that the world works. So just be aware of that. If you live in Trinidad, you don't have to worry about season, moon, tides. I know that there's a traditional farming part that I have a lot of respect for. So I'm not going to say that it's, whatever. If you decide that, you want to follow certain calendars, also known as almanacs, to know when to plant your cassava, I'm just going to say that for me, I plant cassava whenever I'm able to, when I have the time and the resources to do it. That's all that I consider when I'm planting cassava. Rainy season, wet season, new moon, full moon, first quarter, last quarter, I really couldn't care less. For me, in my garden now, if that can affect harvest or whatever, in the long run, it is, I'm not going to say that's impossible. It's just that I haven't found any reason to worry so much about it. If I'm going to get 10, 20% more, doesn't really bother me because I'm not a commercial grower. If I was a commercial grower, I'd pay more attention to those things, perhaps. But for you all, as majority home gardeners, if you're a professional gardener, you really don't come to me for advice. There are professional people for that purpose. Get in contact with them, call the hotlines and UE and these other big companies, chemical companies and whatnot. Those are the people you need to go for your real advice. If you're a home gardener, just really don't worry too much about it, and that's the advice I'm going to be giving. Okay. So now, in terms of fertilizing, I'm going to get into another set of trouble, which is that I never fertilize my cassava. I do not see a big reason for it. What I will do is when I have planted in my cassava at about 6 weeks, I will start to add in manure just around the base, right? Molding it up a little bit. And then when maybe it goes another 6 weeks, I'll put some more manure just to give it some boost of nutrition. But I'm not very, very much worrying about cassava and fertilizer because cassava can grow with very, very little nutrition. It does need nutrition. There is no doubt about that. You do need to feed it something. It won't just grow in just bare sand. But it's not something that I'm very, very much worrying about. Cassava really is one of those low maintenance crops that'll just make it happen. Some, like in life, there are people that just kind of make things happen. You don't need to worry or check up too much on them. They're just going to make it happen. That's cassava. And that's why it's such an amazing, amazing crop for you and your family to be growing and to have in your backyard garden as much as possible. Once you have the space for it, you're going to be able to grow cassava and you're going to be able to grow it fairly well. You're going to shock yourself. I'm 100% sure you're going to shock yourself. And this act of having food security is something that I don't just think it's something that you should have. I think it's something that you must have. I think it's something that you deserve. I feel like it's your right to be able to have your own food in your backyard or in your front yard. Just being able to produce and feed yourself and your family, and even more than that, letting your children see where their food is coming from. Sorry for rambling, but it really is something that I believe. I believe that you deserve, and I feel like you should really have that experience at least once in your life. Now, I know I went a little bit off topic, but when it comes to cassava and sunlight, because it's a warm weather crop, a summer sun-loving crop, you want to give your cassava uninhibited access to direct sunlight. So that means that your cassava isn't planted anywhere shady. That means that your cassava isn't fighting for sunlight. No less than 6 to 7 hours of direct sunlight. So not anywhere that has too much of shade or canopy covering. You want your cassava to be in the dead direct direction of the sun so that it can photosynthesize, because cassava, just like every other root crop, works by the leaves gathering sunlight, so they're little solar panels, and they take that energy, they use it to grow and to be healthy and to be strong, and whatever they don't need, they will store it into their tubers, and that's what we harvest. So if it's not getting that access to sunlight, it's not going to, one, grow very, very well, and two, it's not going to be able to produce the kind of harvest that you want to harvest when you come in eventually and harvest. And especially because you're going to be waiting pretty much up to a year for your cassava, you want to make sure that you're feeding it and giving it the right things. And feeding it doesn't always have to be feeding it with nutrition, but rather feeding it with the energy that it needs to grow. Now, this will be important if you're planting on a little bit bigger scale, but if you are planting in your sticks of cassava, you want to put them a very minimum of 1.5 feet apart, so another 18 inches, 12 to 18 inches, closer to the 18 inches, because you see the cassava roots, they do spread out, so you don't want them to be interfering with each other. So just about a half a meter, right? So about, let's make it 2 feet, right? Um, so then that you have good space, so that your cassava, even though they can't grow next to each other, they have enough space to grow right? And to be able to spread and to swell and become big and strong, because you don't want them to be fighting for space and nutrition on you there. You also have to be aware of the fact that the leaves are going to be competing. So when you have your sticks coming down, your sticks, there's going to be foliage out there, so that foliage is going to want space. Because if it is too jumbled up, that can create problems for your cassava. And there we go. That's how simple it is to grow cassava. It really isn't anything that you need to worry too much about in terms of growing. The hardest part with growing cassava is just getting up and getting growing. It's something that people think that they see just, this nice, wonderful, amazing crop. People are selling it and the price for it can go skyrocket at certain times of the year. And you think that, wow, it has to be some big, amazing professional grower to be able to accomplish that. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You can grow your cassava right at home without very, very much at all. I really encourage you to do it. I really hope that you're going to take that leap and try to grow the cassava. You're going to be great. And if you do take my advice and you start growing cassava, or if you're already growing cassava, then feel free to tag me on Instagram, TikTok, or on Facebook so I can see what's happening in your garden. So that'll be such a big, amazing motivation for me and for my family to see what's happening with you all in your garden. Feel free to follow us on any of those platforms. And feel free, if you know somebody who'd be interested in growing their own healthy organic food and seeing about themselves and their family's own food security in a bigger, better way with a crop like cassava, feel free to share this video with them and let's help them to get up and get growing in this time. Remember, as always, it's been Dylan from the Trinidad Gardener channel reminding you to get up and get growing. Take care.